Tourism is our business. Let's play our part. We've been saying that now for decades. How many of you, however, know someone actually playing their part with not one, but two hotel properties? How many of them are female and how many of them are under 50? I only know one. And she's our guest today for Pivot Pioneers as we look at women trailblazing in their respective fields. Today we get to meet Ms. Renee Coppin. How are you?
I am great, DNL. After that introduction, I feel a little bit intimidated, but I'm wonderful.
Well, you did it to yourself. That's all I can say. You are the general manager and owner of two businesses.
Yes.
And in the hub of our tourism industry. And you've managed to do it all before 50. You know, if this was a Forbes magazine, you'd have a space in it. That's all I'm going to say. We're just going to,
They need to make a space for me, Gaynell.
I'm just saying, It's all about creating spaces for women, which is why we do this. So I need to ask you, first and foremost, how did you even get into tourism?
Well, interestingly, or maybe not that interestingly, my first job out of university, I did a degree in management, but my first job was as a tour rep at Thompson. And I took it because I was really looking for employment because I needed money. And I knew it was probably not going to be my career trajectory, but I wanted to obviously earn some income and do something that I thought would be interesting. So I applied for this job, got it, and I was surprised at how much I loved it. I spent 3 months doing it, and during that time, I did extremely well. I got the top customer satisfaction reviews. Guests really seemed to like me, and I was able to sell because you had to sell tours and stuff. I learned a lot about my island, really got a passion for the island I lived in. But then I said, this is really not going to put me on the path that I need to be on. I need to get into something a little bit more serious. And even though it paid well, etc., I actually applied for another job and took a lower paying job because I thought it would put me more on the path I wanted to be on. So I went to Regional Business Systems, worked there for a brief time, and then I saw an application for British American Tobacco was doing a 2-year management training program. And it was a full-page ad, very splashy, looked like exactly where I needed to be to get to where I wanted to go. And so I applied for that and I was successful. So I spent 2 years there. I worked with a local company here, and then I went on to Trinidad for almost a year. And then I came back and I worked with Tabisco as a brand manager. And then I got an opportunity to work with IBM and I moved there. And all this time I realized I wasn't loving what I was doing. And so I wanted to go back. I thought I wanted to go back to tourism. So while I was working with IBM, I started doing my master's and MBA with the University of Surrey. And while I was doing that, my dissertation, I decided to focus on tourism and look at e-commerce because e-commerce was then emerging. I was working in a technology company. So it was like a good marriage of the two. And I started doing my dissertation on e-commerce and its impact on tourism. And while I was doing that and working at IBM, I remember being in a Cisco conference and literally having an out-of-body experience and floating above myself and saying, Renee, why the hell are you here? This is not what you're supposed to be doing. And so I started then actively reading the newspaper from the back. And I saw a small advert, and it was for setting up a secretariat for representing small hotels. And, just a very, very small. I said, this can't really be that serious, but I'm going to apply because it looks interesting. And that was actually the establishment of the Intimate Hotels of Barbados, Small Hotels of Barbados. I was the founding executive director. So I got to set up the secretariat to work with small hoteliers. And it was exactly what I wanted to do, exactly where I wanted to be. And
so this is like laying the groundwork,
yes,
literally,
yes,
for where you're going to end up.
Yes.
But were you thinking at the time, I want to own one of these small hotels?
I don't know if I was thinking that actively. I remember when we were building our house telling my plumber that I'm going to. I don't know why I told him that. I don't think I was
We tell our plumbers a lot of things that have nothing to do with
Literally.
the pipes.
Plumbers, bartenders, confidants.
Everybody.
So I told him I think I'm going to own a small hotel. And soon after that, one of the owners, wrong order. I got pregnant. And after having a baby, I had one of those aha moments. I don't want to work full time. I want to spend more time with my child. Yeah. And I asked my board of directors if I could work part-time and come out and actually not be employed, but work almost as a consultant. And they agreed. And during that time, one of the owners of the hotel approached me and said she was looking to sell her property. And she wanted to move on to another phase of her life. She'd done it enough. She'd worked very hard. She'd built a good business and she wanted to move on. And we started talking from there. And I don't know, it's almost preordained, but from there we got into discussion and I said to her, well, it sounds like something I'd like to do because I'm interested in working for myself. I'm working less because I just had a baby.
Right.
I'm thinking of something that would be less demanding on my time and give me more flexibility. And we started talking, and we somehow arranged that we could go into a lease to own arrangement. I would take over the property. And that's how I started at Pirates Inn.
Why did you think it would be less time though?
I don't know, Gaynell. I don't know. Maybe I didn't think less time, but maybe I thought it would be more flexibility, because that's what having a structure. Yeah, having a structure. I thought maybe I would have the ability to plan my time a bit better.
Okay.
So yeah.
So you're basically raising baby, raising second baby, aka Pirates Inn,
yes,
before the third baby comes along, as in your second human baby.
Yes.
So somewhere in between there's a lot going on, and you are now the proprietor, so to speak, of a small 22-room hotel.
Property, yes.
It had relative success, as you said. She had built a good business. So no pressure, but you now have to maintain a standard.
Yes. Luckily for me, I think we had a very good synergy, and it just taking over the property, because I think Elizabeth Johnson, who ran it prior to my running it, was just an outstanding, I think she's an outstanding businesswoman. Very smart, very kind of switched on in principle. The way she ran business made it very easy to follow in her footsteps, because we have very similar values and perspectives on how things should be done. And so taking it over was obvious. So I had then gone pregnant. I had my second baby. I took over Pirates Inn when I just had my second baby. And it just, as I said, everything just seemed to flow naturally. And then a few years after that, I started to look for funding, because Pirates Inn was, even though it's a great business and it was doing well, I felt like I wasn't paying the property and paying myself as well as I could be. And so I wanted to do some renovations. I started talking to banks, and they were like, well, 22 rooms are really the rooms. Like, you've all got about 50 rooms. So I was like, 50 rooms, how do I do that? And so I literally started looking around to see if I can find another property so I could add rooms, because they talked about revenue and break even and all these things that, you needed to be at a certain point in order for you to make this viable. And in doing that, I came across this property that was shut up on the Gap. There were literally 2 properties I looked at, but this one somehow spoke to me. I even took the kids there and said, what do you think of this? And they liked it. And luckily, the person who owned it was a member of small hotels, of intimate hotels, so she knew me. And she connected me to the owners, and our conversation started from there. And again, things just seemed to fall into place. In none of this did I have a lot of money. I wasn't I wasn't set and financially secure, but it just happened that the opportunities came up at a time that allowed me to go into them, to manage them in a way that I didn't have I did have to take loans. I did have to, but I didn't have to have a huge asset base or a huge financial base to do what I needed to do. And so similarly with Infinity, I approached the owners. I said, look, this is what I'm looking to do. I can offer you this. I put together the project plan. I will lease the property, and I will run it in the same way I run Pirates Inn. And it will be my business. You can retain ownership. I'll do the project plan, get the financing, run the project. And that's how we got going. And that was 7 years ago.
That was so interesting that you mentioned that you didn't have this huge asset base. There's not huge amounts of generational wealth coming down that you get to dip into, no trust funds or anything like that. Because I'm thinking to myself, if I wanted to renovate my bedroom, I'd need a loan. And they need 50 rooms to make this worth their while. And you had to actively go about, how do I find the additional, 23 rooms or whatever it is to make this thing viable to secure the financing, which leads me to my next question. It's a business. How approachable are financial institutions with these things?
My experience with financial institutions has not been great. It has been very varied. It is really coming down to finding the right relationships and kind of working with that, and building partnerships with people who have the right connections. So I've actually had to work with people who I know have good relationships with people in the banking sector to kind of get me my foot in. But with Pirates Inn, I had a great banker at the time. She was very supportive, and she helped me to put together the funding I needed to get that going. And luckily it wasn't huge. I mean, Elizabeth did not require me to have a huge investment in terms of security, et cetera, to get it going.
Right.
So she worked with me. For Infinity, it was a lot more involved. But because I had done, as I said, I did all of the work, the project planning, everything, I secured the financing for it. When I then went to my own bankers to try and get the money that I needed from my end for the business, because there was their business of getting the property set up and renovated. There was my business of setting up Infinity on the beach as a company. They were much more receptive. Obviously, I had Pirates Inn then. And so
you had some collateral.
Yes,
Right.
and I had the intellectual capital. So that
Right.
was what I was working with. And in all of these, that's what I've leveraged. I haven't had the asset base or the money, the cash necessarily, but the intellectual capital. I knew I could do it. I was able to put my plans on paper, and I used what I learned to try and help me to leverage that. But I would definitely say that, especially as a Black woman, it's not always easy working with the banking sector in Barbados.
Which is a whole different conversation in and of itself. So we'll probably save that for season 3. I'll pivot. Let me ask you though, because we're talking about, you said you did management, so I know marketing was in there somewhere.
Yes.
Product differentiation, especially when you're still dealing with small hotels, but you want each hotel to sustain its own charm, but still run it within a system that doesn't make you have to look for 3 different vendors, 3 different this, 3 different that, because you got to be smart about these things. TP is TP. I mean, how many different sources do we need for toilet paper and soap and that sort of thing?
So between the 2 properties, I now have 88 rooms. I mean, it's definitely by no means a large hotel. It wouldn't, if it were one hotel, classify as a small hotel, but it gives me a little bit more of economies of scale that I can work with. We have centralized our things like our purchasing, our housekeeping. We've centralized so that we have housekeepers, but we have a head housekeeper who is based at one property who works between the 2 kind of. So there are things that we have done to make the running of the property more efficient. Each property is very unique in that Pirates Inn, they're both budget hotels, they're both 3-star hotels, but Pirates Inn is an affordable apartment hotel, centrally located, not on the beach. Persons coming there tend to be longer stay. They're looking for something that is the hub, that they can branch out, and they just want a great base. Infinity is more of a vacation resort type feel. Even though it's small, it has 2 pools, it has a full restaurant, we have a pool bar, it's on the beach, it's in the heart of the Gap. So it definitely has a different feel. But what we have tried to do is to build commonalities and to work with the commonalities to make the business more efficient.
Now, I notice you always say we, because I understand that your husband, Kenny, is also an integral part of the operations.
Yes.
How do you work at work and at home?
He wasn't always a part of the operations. He came in about 6 years ago. So a lot of this time that I was working on my own. And he would just get to hear me griping about it. Because running a hotel really is, I love it, but it definitely comes with its challenges. So he came in about 6 years ago. We work very well together because we both, even at home, in terms of home, like I'm the Minister of Finance and Education. He has a lot of other portfolios, external works, culture and sport, transport. So we have a system set up at home where we work to our strengths, and we've done the same thing in the business. I'm a fairly strong personality. So luckily he's a very secure human being. So we kind of know where our boundaries are and we work to suit. And in running we actually at work hardly ever see each other because he's in charge of operations and I'm in charge of marketing and HR and a lot of the other kind of administrative things. So he's a lot on the road between the 2 properties and dealing with those things. And I am a lot in the office working and just trying to sort those things out. So we work really well together.
Fantastic.
Yes, sometimes.
Renee, it is so funny that you used a government analogy to describe how your household and your business operates with everybody with their own ministerial portfolios, because my next question was going to be, as an industry player, do you feel like government should have more of a role in the overall framework of the tourism industry, or kind of leave that to the players to generate for themselves?
I have grown up in Barbados, which is pretty much a social democracy. And so my views are going to be framed by that. I think the system that we have where government provides administrative and legal and statutory frameworks for us to operate in is actually ideal. And what I think COVID has highlighted even more so is that government also needs to play what I would say is almost, in addition to their administrative role, an entrepreneurial role. And I don't say they haven't always done that, but COVID has definitely highlighted how it is important for government to be involved in providing mechanisms to help things run more efficiently. So for example, setting up new state-owned enterprises like the Harrison's Point and the COVID monitoring unit during COVID are perfect examples of why we need to have government involved in administration. And I think as we go forward and as we come out of COVID, it's going to be important that government continues to set things in place and a framework in place that we can operate within. Because everyone will always have their individual interests and their individual needs, but we have to operate as a society. And I want that when tourism returns in Barbados, we are welcoming of tourists. I think there's been a lot of resentment because people perceive that, this was brought in by people from outside and I think often the tourism practitioners have not articulated our positions in a way that wins us support from Barbadians. So I want to ensure that we continue to work with government and we continue to have a partnership that allows us to have a tourism industry that works for the benefit of all of us, because tourism really is our business. There's not a lot, we've had a lot of talk now about other things that need to be brought in to support what we're doing, but really tourism will continue for the foreseeable future to be the engine of growth for our economy. And so I need that it works well for everyone and that people are bought in and committed to the success of the industry.
Yeah. Now, it might be early days yet, but what has COVID taught you about trying your best to disaster-proof your business?
That is a really difficult question to answer. Disaster proofing for us in the past, we had our health and safety committee, we had our disaster recovery plan, but a disaster was a moment in time. So Hurricane X was going to fly through, knock off some shutters, we'd shut the business for maybe a week or two, our insurance would kick in to do the repairs and we'd start back going. COVID is an entirely different level because no matter what your continuity planning, no matter what your systems were that you had in place, I don't think we ever conceived of a pandemic. And that may be a fault on our part, but I don't think there are many other people who had. And certainly we did not conceive of being shuttered for literally almost a year, because it's almost a year now that we have had to close, reopen. So as we go forward in terms of disaster proofing, I think the things we're going to be thinking about, because what this disaster has shown us, this pandemic has shown us, is that really our support and our continuity needs to be with our people. So we're thinking a lot more in terms of how are we going to disaster-proof our people and disaster-proof our investment in our staff. We did have a severance fund, and luckily we had it because we were able to use that to help us to put some cash flow back into the business. Unfortunately, we no longer have a severance fund, but things like having a severance fund, having layoff plans, having a work schedule plan in place for if this kind of thing happens again, who will remain at work, how will they work, having VPNs, simple things like VPNs in place to ensure that staff can work from home, having your computer system set up for that. All of those things are going to go into our disaster planning and disaster proofing as we go forward.
Well, now that you mentioned that, what are some of the things that you've had to put into place that you think now we need to retain this as a part of our normal modus operandi now?
Certainly the work flexibility. We like most places had everybody coming in every day between, in a hotel it's a bit more flexible because you work shifts generally, but there are a lot of people who can efficiently and effectively work from home. And having the flexibility to do that opens up, I think, a lot more people who may have the interest in working, but not necessarily coming into a building to work. Just in terms of our staffing, and I think we've streamlined a lot of our processes better now that we've had to look at, okay, these are things we were doing, but maybe not efficiently. So we can do them a lot more efficiently because we understand now that we can meld this with this and make this work together. So there are a lot of things in terms of our processes and our staffing that we're going to be looking at a little bit differently as we go forward.
Now, I know you spoke about things like a severance fund, and you spoke about things like having certain contingency plans, but for something as unheard of and as unspoken, really, as COVID was, what do you think would have helped you in retrospect? What would have helped you more navigate this pandemic a little bit more efficiently?
I'm going to say nothing. I don't know that you could have navigated this more. I think at the end of the day, navigating this depended on your personal resiliency. Obviously, as a business, you need to have resiliency, financial resiliency. But for me, navigating this has really just been the ability to step away and to recognize that some things are not within my control, focus on the things I can control, and try to do those things as best I can. Because if you get bogged down, and I think a lot of people, in terms of your mental health and your ability to continue to run a business, to lead people, to be accountable to the people that you do lead, you need to ensure first that you emotionally, psychologically are dealing with being prepared for that and understanding that you cannot control all of these things. So let me try and focus on the things that I can control.
And in terms of like comms or just a general industry direction, do you think?
Okay, so on that macro level,
right.
I didn't really want to touch it because I think it is difficult to be critical in a situation where everything is novel.
So new. And
Everything is new.
Literally.
But so one of the things that I value, and I think that from working with my team, they value is communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so ensuring that there's collaboration at the point when decisions are being made, ensuring that communication is clear, ensuring that it's timely, those are things definitely that on a macro, on a bigger level, that I would appreciate, that would have helped us to navigate a little bit better. But again, I honestly am very, very hesitant to be critical, because I know that people were just catching the royal. They really were. All of us were just trying to figure this out as it evolved.
Right. And as information is coming from here, there, this
Yes.
expert, and changing almost by the week.
Correct.
What we did last week can no longer apply
Correct.
this week. How do you plan for stuff like that?
And when you think you've hit the bottom, like we thought we'd hit the bottom and we were like preparing to rebuild, then you hit the bottom again. And then so it has really just been a constant, and people have had to react. So it is the resiliency that's the most important thing, and keeping perspective.
Yeah. Well, how do you do it for yourself on a personal level?
Luckily, I have extremely good support systems. We talked about the fact that I work in the business, obviously, with my life partner. I have 2 children who are a tremendous source of support. If it is just a matter of just keeping me sane, they definitely do it and keep me grounded and focused. And again, it's a matter of perspective and emotional maturity, and recognizing that I have survived so far. And I believe that I have the ability to continue to survive. So it is just about putting things in place to make sure that happens. Because I want to be able to look back and invite you for a drink at the bar and say, I remember when you did that interview we talked about. I want to be able to have that moment. And so my goal in this is to focus on all the things I can do to ensure that I come out on the other end of it.
COVID aside, what would success look like for Renee Coppin?
Success for me would be, I don't know. That is a great question, Gaynell, because I feel like I'm living the success right now. I feel like I'm where I want to be. I mean, I'm not financially independent. I don't necessarily have all of my bases covered, but I feel like I've actualized. I'm doing the things I love. I'm living a good life and I'm enjoying it. And I think that is how I measure success. And so I don't know there's much. Yes, so there are things I would love to complete my mortgages on the property, and I have a personal mortgage. I'd like to have that off of my table. I'd like to actually build a property of my own. This is one of my goals, that I'd like to build a property from the ground up. Because I have so much experience now in running older properties. I know the things that work well and that don't. So I'd like to, and be able to put my own stamp on it. So those things, yes, would be a measure of success, but I really feel like I'm living my best life.
I like that though. Coin a phrase if it works. Absolutely. So what advice then would you have for up and coming business owners of whatever capacity, whether it's hotels, whether it's salons, whether it's consultancies, just the concept of being a business owner?
Being a business owner is very rewarding. And so I would encourage anyone, if they're having thoughts of going into business for themselves and they have a viable idea, I would encourage them to pursue it. What I would say to people is that they need to stay focused. You can easily become distracted. You have to stay focused. You have to look at where you are now, where you want to be, and what are the things you need to do to get there. I would say you need to not be afraid to seek help when you need it. And that help can be emotional, it can be financial, it can come in many different forms. So for example, right now, I've been one of those people, I've been very reluctant to there's a best program available, I've been reluctant to reach out and use it because of this idea of putting myself into debt. And so you have to fight those demons. You have to look around you and see what are the resources available? How best do I utilize those resources to help me get through this moment? So definitely seek help if you need it. Invest in yourself. Invest in yourself in terms of training, constant and consistent improvement, continual training and education. Invest in your financial well-being. Invest in yourself. I spoke to you when I talked about my 5 Fs, I think the other night when we did that session, about my 5 fitness being one of them, faith, family, friends, and my finances. And those are the things, because balance is very critical. And so making an investment in yourself is critical if you're going to invest in a business. I think that's pretty much it.
That's some great advice. And if nothing else, the 5 Fs, master them. Renee, as you know, at the top of this show, I highlighted the fact that you are not yet 50, and I'm not rushing you, but you have been in this game now for a while. You can be considered a pioneer. 16 years is no joke. That's what we call skin in the game. How do you sustain longevity?
I think one of the things that I aim to do is to run the business properly. I think when you're an entrepreneur, there is a temptation to take shortcuts because you're working for yourself. And especially if the business starts to become profitable, to do things that, and I'll give you for example, one of the things that I've always tried to do is to pay myself a salary, because there are a lot of people who get into business, and this is where I've seen a lot of businesses fail, and they start taking money out of the business. So all of a sudden you'll see them driving the biggest car, you'll see them and living a lifestyle because the business is doing well, but the business is a separate entity from you, and you have to remind yourself of that. And so that's something that I have always tried to ensure that I do, to ensure that I pay myself a livable salary and take the money at the end if it comes as dividends. So I think continuity is running the business professionally, recognizing too when this is beyond your ability. Because as an entrepreneur, sometimes you hold things too close to your chest and you want to do everything and you don't let things go. And I have been guilty of that for certain. So recognizing when I need to bring in somebody else with these expertise because I don't have these expertise, or this is beyond my actual expertise. That's another thing that I think is important. But generally, I would say that once you have the idea, you have the passion and the love, and you adhere to certain principles and standards, recognizing when you move from entrepreneurial to professional management, bringing in people you need or outsourcing skills that you need, I think those are things that help to ensure that your business keeps going.
Well, what about innovation and reinventing yourself, all these catchphrases we hear thrown about? How do we do that without obscuring the core quality of what you're offering?
So I think that if you do the things I suggested first, you can spend more time doing those things.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, because I have, especially with Infinity, I got really bogged down. When I started running it, I was trying to do everything and be everyone. And it was because I was scared. I didn't want to spend money I hadn't earned. I didn't know how the business was going to do starting up. There were a lot of issues in terms of, obviously we're a new business trying to get customers in, setting up contracts with tour operators. So I tried to be too bogged down. And if you're too busy working in the business, this is, I think, a catchphrase, you then are not able to work on the business. So if you can remove yourself sometimes a little bit, then you can be at the higher level where you're focused on the strategic stuff and trying to do the things that will actually help your business to grow and help it to be successful. And that's what I think a lot of us need, especially as women, because I think as a woman, you want to hold on to everything, you want to control everything, but you really have to realize that you can't and know when to let go.
Well, I was not going to bring it up, but then I thought, well, you just opened the door, so why not? Do you feel sometimes slightly more pressure because you are a woman and there's some sort of innate expectation that we're too emotional, we don't work well with other women for some reason, and that somehow failure is more imminent with us because of all these other distractions than perhaps it is with our male counterparts? Do you feel that in some way contributes to the whole, I can do this, I am all things to this business?
I think so. I think I can share with you stories of being maligned because I was too, I'm going to use the word uppity.
Uppity.
I remember running for a post in an organization, and the person who I would have succeeded in the post, basically working to undermine me because he felt that I was not going to be competent. And I'm thinking to myself, I looked around the room and I'm thinking to myself, I don't see anybody here who's necessarily better qualified. They may be older, but I think I would be up to this task. But he had determined that I was not suitable. And so he put every obstacle in my path to ensure that I did not succeed. And so there is a real, and whether it's because I was a woman, whether it's because I was too young, there are many factors that could have played into his beliefs. But that has been something that I've had to fight against, being too enough. And so I try to ensure that I do not allow people to diminish me because I'm up to this task. And you're going to have to prove to me that I'm not, because I'm stepping into this role assuming that I can get this done.
Now, you've given us good advice about working on the business rather than so ingrained in the business that you can't see the bigger picture. Try not to be all things to all people. Knowing where your strengths are, or as we like to say, stay in your lane. Knowing where your strengths are, work to them and outsource the rest. And there comes a point at which also you have to know when I actually can't physically contain the capacity any more than this. Like 3, 4, 5, 6 properties is not on the cards. Even with the best of systems, intent, how do you know when that is?
I think your body tells you when you have done or when you have gone too far, and you have to be able to listen to yourself and to respect that. And so for me, I don't necessarily, like I listened to one of my former university professors talk about growing a business and how you want to be, move from small to, I don't necessarily want to be the big, I'm quite happy with my 88 rooms and my 2 properties. I'm comfortable. And you have to know what your comfort level is. So you determine at the outset, where do I want to go? And for me, I'm happy. I want to be the best I can be in what I'm doing. And I don't think I'm yet there. And so for me, that is my project, to improve what I am doing. But I don't necessarily want to own a 300 room. I definitely don't want to own a 300 room property. I don't necessarily need another property. I'd like to build a property from scratch. But that does not mean that I want to have more than what I have. It means that maybe I would put one of these properties to the side and say, let me start something of my own and build it from the ground up. But yes, I know my limits, and that is important.
Well, you seem to know what you want, how much of it you want, and how you plan to get it if you so choose to decide to pursue it. And this might sound like the silliest of questions, but let's face it, you work in tourism. So how does Renee take vacation?
I travel.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. I pack the family up. We pack a few suitcases and we go somewhere new. And we usually do that every year for a couple of weeks, because if I don't leave this island, I do not get a break. So we generally tend, 4 of us, to pack up and go to somewhere that we just have always wanted to see.
So how do you do that, staying in the hotel room thinking, wonder what their purchasing is like?
Oh God, no, I'm a terrible guest. First thing I do is go everywhere and fingertip testing and yes, but no, I think I've gotten better, and definitely I enjoy being out and about. We don't stay in the most expensive, we can't afford to, but we don't stay in the most expensive resorts. When we go places, we go on a great base, and we go out and we do everything we can possibly do. Right. And that's the kind of tourist that we are. So
what's been your most exciting trip to date, do you think?
Oh my goodness, I was just saying a little while ago that I traveled a few years ago to Amsterdam, and I loved it. New York is one of my go-tos. I love New York. It is true, though. Oh my God. I love New York.
You see a different part of New York every time you go.
Yes.
That's how I feel about New York.
Yes. Yes. So I would say, but I think my absolute favorite so far, trip so far, ironically enough, is probably Canada. We we stayed by the lakes, and that's the first time I'd done it. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Good for you. I've never stayed by the lakes.
That's just it. You don't you go to Toronto, you go to the cities. I stayed by the lakes.
I lived there and I never went by the lakes. I'll try it. Now I can see Canada in a different way. That sounds amazing. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Getting to know you again has been an absolute pleasure. I mean, secret, we've known each other since we were like 16, 17, but you never quite know how your friends are going to end up at some point. And I am elated to see how your family has grown, your business has grown, and you've left an imprint. That's the most exciting part. I can definitely say I can see her imprint on the tourism product and the Barbadian landscape, and that's exciting for me.
Thank you.
You've been an exciting addition to the Pivot series, and we thank you, Renee Coppin.
Thank you very much, Gina. I've enjoyed it.
We certainly hope you had not only nuggets of wisdom, but inspiration, and had fallen in love with your favorite island all over again. Make sure you join us for the next episode of Pivot Pioneers. This is a season 2 production, and we are as excited as ever to bring you the best in female entrepreneurship.